Yo, what is going on, guys? You got Glop, and today I'm bringing you coverage of my Week 8 match from the DGBA. Before I get into the team builder, there's a few things that I want to discuss, namely about the DGBA itself, actually. As a reminder, it is a public Discord server that anybody can join. I've got the link to that down in the description. And as a side note, funnily enough, we're actually coming up for the next season of applicants. So you've only got like a week or so left to get those apps in. So if you are interested in potentially having a chance to compete in this league, down in the description, I have also linked the application where you can submit your matches and information about you so that the council can review it and see if maybe you're a good fit. So without any further ado, I want to get right into the team builder. And as always, if you are not interested in that, on your screen, you are now going to see a timestamp. That timestamp is also in the description of the video. So for those of you still with me, let's get into it. I am going up against Kraft this week, and his team consists of Mew, Rillaboom, Sylveon, Keldeo, Miltank, Zygarde, Aerodactyl, Mega Sableye, Rotom, Muck, Flareon, and Fortress. And I should put a little special note here. In draft format, it is standard where Rotom, you draft the individual form. So in this case, they drafted Rotom Regular Edition. So just keep that in mind. Now, when I took a first look at this team, the glaring threats to me were Rillaboom, Aerodactyl, Sableye, and Rotom for a few reasons. Sableye can be an issue because my team likes to rely on passive damage, whether that's through hazards or generally just being annoying with things like knockoff and toxic, and Sableye kind of shuts that down, so I've got to be mindful of that thing. I truly think the biggest threat here is the Rotom. It has the potential to kind of set up and destroy all of my team. It's got a nice speed tier where it outspeeds a lot of my members, and what's annoying is that Muck no longer has access to Pursuit in Generation 8, so I can't punish that thing for ever coming out. It can just come in, do its business, and get out for free, so I've got to be very mindful of that. Aerodactyl can also be a threat just because I don't have the best defensive answers to that Pokemon. It's got exceptionally good coverage, and if it's played intelligently, can be a huge threat to my team. Also, Rillaboom is kind of a threat. I know I have a Moltres and a Tangrowth here, but genuinely a well-played Rillaboom can be a huge threat, especially if it's something like SD. So I've got to be mindful of that, because again, Moltres is good at checking it, but if it gets knocked off and Stealth Rock is up, it has a much harder time dealing with it. So the first member I thought that would be, would make a lot of sense to bring would be the Tangrowth here, and I'm using an Assault Vest set similar to what we used last week. We've got Knockoff to get rid of items, we've got Grass Knot, Sludge Bomb, and Power Whip. So the reason I'm running Grass Knot, as you can see here, no special attack investment, we can always 100% break a sub from even max SPDEF, max HP Zygarde, which I do feel is important here. I think Zygarde's coming for sure. It's definitely a threatening Pokemon, and I want to make sure that that thing can't get behind a sub and do its dirty business. So as you can see, the minimum damage we can do is 105, and a max HP Zygarde makes substitutes that are at 105, so it would cover that if that's what they elect to bring. I've also got Sludge Bomb here just as a way to, hit Rillaboom much harder. Also threatens their team with poisons. For example, if they want to switch out into the Sableye, we can get a poison on that thing. And Power Whip is here mostly for the Keldeo. Keldeo, if it wants to set up, with Substitute and Calm Mind, that can be very threatening. So I want to make sure I have a physical way to hit it, which is Power Whip, and that'll always break the sub. So the next member I've got here is Hippowdon, and Hippowdon's here for a few reasons. Namely, it's here to help check the Aerodactyl as well as the Zygarde. Mainly Zygarde, though. We're using Whirlwind just like we did last week, where we can get rid of that thing if it's set up behind a substitute, or if it's got too many, Dragon Dances underneath its belt, we can just Whirlwind, get that guy out of there. Slack Off to keep ourselves healthy. Earthquake is just our usual stab move, and then, of course, we have Rocks to punish switches. Now, a couple things to note. Aerodactyl typically runs heavy-duty boots, so we got to be mindful of that. If we can get a knockoff on that thing, that's very valuable. That way, Stealth Rock will actually be punishing it whenever it switches in. And the other thing to note here is that I've got some SPDEF EVs, and you're probably thinking, well, what the hell does that do for you, Glop? That's not going to change anything. Well, I hope this week will illustrate to you just how important your EVs are in draft format, because generally, in like the standard formats like ladder or competitive, you typically want to run pretty much max on everything because you want to optimize to cover as much as possible. Whereas in draft format, you're only countering the specific set of Pokemon that your opponent has. So it often makes a lot of sense to optimize to that. So something I'd like to illustrate here. is I'm going to go ahead and pull up Rotom, and let's assume it's Life Orb and it's running Nasty Plot. Now it has to run Timid Nature, otherwise it can't outspeed Moltres if I was to run max speed. So I'm pretty confident that Timid will be the nature of choice. So as you can see here, Shadow Ball, in this case, if I'm at max HP, Hippowdon will always live that. If I don't have these 20 Spadef EVs, it actually has a chance to knock us out. And that is a big deal because, again, I feel like Rotom truly is the biggest threat here. So to me, it made a lot of sense where I've already got enough, bulk to be able to take on Zygarde and Aerodactyl. Let's throw some into Spadef to make sure that, let's say Muck's out of the picture, Tangrowth dies. I need some way to get rid of that Rotom, otherwise it's going to destroy me. So that's why I elected to put those Spadef EVs there. And you can see that our next member is also really tailored to take on this Rotom. So let me kind of illustrate that here. We've got a Muck with an interesting set. We're actually running a Curse, Rest, Sleep Talk set. And I think that Mono Dark does pretty well into their roster. If we get rid of Keldeo or the Sylveon and weaken Zygarde, realistically, Muck can actually win this. It can just curse up alongside everything else and just lay down the beatdown. So I'm really excited to see how this set does. As you can see here, we have a set where, oh, what is this? Well, here's the thing I wanted to show. I wanted to show not Life Orb, but regular like this, yeah. So I didn't EV for Life Orb in this case, but as you can see, if they are at +2 with Rotom, we're always going to be able to live the Thunderbolt. We can take 2 of those. If it is Life Orb, obviously that is more problematic, but in that case, I've got ways I can play around that. So for example, I can pivot into Tangrowth, and then maybe from there I pivot into Muck again, just trying to Life Orb stall that thing. So that's partially the reason why I have the specific set of special defense EVs there. I've also got some defense EVs, and you might be wondering what that's all about. So Mew can be a threat depending on its set, and I kind of want to illustrate here that if it's a mixed set, for example, it can definitely, cause our team some problems. So I figure if they do bring the Mew, that it might be running Earthquake. So let's take a look here at max attack Earthquake. This is assuming Jolly, of course. This is how much Earthquake is doing. So if I have Muck in versus Mew and I'm at full health, I can actually go for Curse in front of it because, as you're about to see, when we're at +1, the next Earthquake will not knock us out. And to kind of illustrate that, basically, the max I can do is 62. So after Black... Alright, people, so before I make myself look like a dumbass, I am now re-recording this specific part of the video because I don't know how to math and I completely gave misinformation. So let's fix this real quick. Now, what I was actually trying to show you folks, and you're probably wondering, why do I sound so much better in post-recording? And the answer to that is I don't know. I don't know why I sounded so quiet in the team builder. But anyways, let's get back to the matter at hand. Okay, so as you can see, folks, max Earthquake does is 62. So math would say that if they do 62, we're left with 38. You follow? Okay, so 38 plus the 6 from recovery, that puts us at 44. So if we go for Curse after taking the Earthquake, we will be at 44%. And the next Earthquake can only do 42%. So we will not be KO'd, all right? So what I was trying to illustrate here is that if I don't have that defense, all right, and this time I'm actually going to do math correctly. Let's say I had no defense and they go for Earthquake. They do 66 max. Let's say I take 66. After leftovers recovery, right, I would be at 40% because 66 puts me at 34 plus 6, 40%, right? So then the next Earthquake after that defense boost, it can do anywhere between 38 and 44, and obviously that would knock us out if they got a mid-roll. So that's what I was trying to illustrate. For some reason, I didn't know how to do math. I know what I'm talking about, but at the same time, I don't. Anyways, I'm going to throw it back to previous me. So these small little EVs, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to optimizing your EVs, because it's not always like these situations are going to come up, but if they do, it's nice to be prepared. And I mean, it maybe only takes you like 5-10 minutes to prepare for this kind of stuff. But anyways, enough on Muck. Again, I think it can do really well. It comes in on the Sableye. It can take Knockoff. It can take a Will-O-Wisp and just heal it off with Rest. It's got a lot of potential in this game. The next member I'm bringing here is Urshifu, and if you look at their team, they legitimately have no switch into this thing. I mean, it will get a kill pretty much every time it comes in. I guess the best thing they would have to take me on is like a physically defensive Fortress, but even that's probably getting 2-hit KO'd by Bandit's Surging Strikes. So I know that how I play this Pokemon is going to be really crucial in determining whether or not I win this game. We've got Aqua Jet for the Aerodactyl. We've got both of our stabs here, and then we have Ice Punch to help with Zygarde, just in case that thing starts to get out of control. It also hits Rillaboom, but close combat does way more to it anyway, so it's really just there for the Zygarde. The next member I'm bringing here is Starmie, and this is our way to get rid of hazards, as well as, oh, sorry, we have Defog on Moltres. This is actually an interesting set for a few reasons. This is our momentum and also some status. So the thought with this guy here is that we've got enough speed to outspeed max speed Keldeo, so that we can always come in on it. If it starts Calm Minding or doing any other shenanigans, we can go for a Psy Shock. That'll always break the sub. It'll always 2-hit KO. We've got Toxic here to punish switch-ins. So for example, say Mew gets out of hand with some crazy Calm Mind or Sword Stance shenanigans. We can come in, go for a Toxic, put that thing on a timer. We got Recover to keep ourselves healthy. And then we have Flip Turn here. And I thought Flip Turn would be really valuable in this matchup because Starmie is probably going to bait out things like the Rillaboom. It's also going to bait out things like the Sylveon, and that's going to provide opportunities for my teammates. So specifically, let's say we go for a Flip Turn onto the, let's say Sableye comes out, or they send out the Sylveon. Depending on what percent that thing's at, we can just go out into our Urshifu here and just click Surging Strikes, and that's going to put in a lot of work versus their team. And say they go out into Rillaboom, we get a Flip Turn into Moltres, and we can start throwing off Toxic and being annoying. And this is actually our last member here. We have enough speed on Moltres here to outspeed max speed Rillaboom, just in case they want to run Sword Stance with max speed. We've got that covered. We have a little bit of extra bulk here for defense, specifically again to take on the Rillaboom. Flamethrower, of course, is our stab of choice. We've got Toxic to put pressure on Sylveon, put pressure on Zygarde if it wants to switch in on us. We can punish that thing with a Toxic. Also, it's Aerodactyl too, which I think is really the big one here, right? Because Aerodactyl otherwise can pretty safely switch in to Moltres. So if we get that thing on a timer, that's going to be great for our team because I really do see it as being a potential threat. Roost, of course, to keep ourselves healthy, and then we have Defog to get rid of hazards. So honestly, looking at this matchup, yes, the Rotom is kind of scary, but I really feel like we have all the tools to win this, and I felt pretty confident going into this game. So alright guys, so we are here for the battle, and looking at the matchup here, this is pretty much what I expected on their end. I was admittedly a little bit surprised to not see the Keldeo. I think its speed tier is great in the matchup, and I think it can hit a lot of my defensive mons pretty hard. But they did bring the Aerodactyl, so I definitely got to be mindful of that. There is a Rotom again, which we are definitely fearful of, and there is the Mew. So they've definitely got a good handful of threats here. So when it came to deciding on my lead, I figured that I wanted to lead something that wouldn't be at a disadvantage to the Aerodactyl. As I mentioned in the team builder, that thing can be a big threat where I don't really have a lot of opportunities to defend against it, and it can kind of like taunt Hippowdon, set up on that thing, get up hazards, go for Toxic, so I need to be mindful of that. So on turn 1 here, I decided that leading off with Starmie is probably going to be my best play, so I do just that. And they lead off with Zygarde, and turn 1, I'm just going to go for a Flip Turn. I'm thinking that Toxic's a little bit obvious, or some kind of status might be obvious, so I just go for a Flip Turn, and it's revealed here that Fortress is the Rocky Helmet, and that is pretty important, because my Urshifu is basically the way that I win this matchup, but if the Fortress has the Rocky Helmet, I can't really do that, because I'm basically going to end up killing myself along with the Fortress, and that's not a trade that I want to make. So I'm going to take this opportunity to go out into my Moltres here, and I'm not going to bother predicting anything. I'm just going to go right for a Flamethrower, as I'm able to get some damage on Rotom, and that's huge. Because again, I do think Rotom is one of the biggest threats to my team in this matchup. So I'm not going to risk any kind of max speed Rotom. I'm going to go right out here into my Muck, because again, it is basically designated to take this thing on, as we do end up eating a Will-O-Wisp, which is not the biggest issue, because again, we do have the rest. And I'm just going to throw off a knockoff here, wanting to get rid of an item, and this is amazing, because I'm able to get rid of Rocky Helmet on the Fortress, and that is actually so huge for us, because now there is legitimately no drawback to clicking Surging Strikes. So I want to focus now on getting Urshifu onto the field, so I can start getting some KOs. Here, however, I am pretty much forced out. I don't want them getting up too many hazards or doing any of that kind of stuff. They actually make a really nice double switch into their Zygarde, and now I'm in a bad position because this thing could be max speed. I might want to go for a substitute. It would block Toxic. Flamethrower is not going to be doing a lot, so I'm going to be forced out here into my Hippowdon, as I do end up going for a substitute. And this isn't the worst thing ever, because again, I do have the Whirlwind. So knowing that I'm kind of safe in front of this thing, I'm going to go for a Stealth Rock, as they reveal Toxic, and that's pretty annoying, because it's going to make Hippowdon's job of basically walling this guy a lot harder to deal with. So I'm just going to go for a Whirlwind here. Don't want it setting up anything too crazy, and I make a really important decision on this turn. Again, I'm on the back burner here with Rillaboom being out, so I'm going to have to pulling a switch here, and I believe I go out into my Muck, yes. And to kind of talk about this a little bit, I could have easily gone out into Moltres, for example, and they probably were expecting that. But if I let Moltres get knocked off, that's really, really bad for me, because I don't have boots anymore, and if they get up Stealth Rock, now Moltres is going to be taking 50% every time it comes in, and that's just not a good thing. So I figured if I had to lose an item on somebody, I'd rather lose it on my Muck, but they end up pulling a double switch here, which again is going to put me on the back foot, so I've got to get out of here. Going to pull a switch into my Hippowdon to take this guy on once again, and I believe what ends up happening here is they go for 1,000 arrows, and I believe I just slack off in the next turn, wanting to keep myself healthy. So let me go ahead and skip the turn. They go for 1,000 arrows. And yep, I do end up going for slack off again, wanting to stay at a healthy amount of HP. And I'm expecting maybe they're going to try to go for a coil or something like that. So I go for a whirlwind just to get it out of there. They're going to end up bringing in the Rotom, which again is pretty scary for me. So I believe I do just go right back out into my Muck as they reveal the Pain Split. So at this point, I'm thinking it might be like Pain Split, Will-O-Wisp sub Hex. Or some kind of other coverage. Not entirely sure though. Either way, I know that the Fortress switch is painfully obvious, so I'm going to pull a switch into my Moltres, and then I'm going to make another prediction here. Going to go for the Toxic, knowing that they're not going to keep the Fortress in, and that works out wonderfully for me because I'm able to get a Toxic on Mew, so this thing is going to be severely hindered in terms of its longevity. Now, the way they brought in Mew made me think that it might be offensive. So I was kind of, anxious about maybe, taking a Thunderbolt or some kind of coverage move. So I'm just going to pull switch into my Muck, seeing as it's kind of at the end of its usefulness here. It can still kind of beat the Rotom, but I don't really want anybody else on my team taking this hit. So they go for Thunderbolt. And here I'm going to expect maybe they've got some kind of ground coverage like Earth Power or Earthquake. So I pull a switch into my Tangrowth, and that's exactly what happens. They do end up going for that Earthquake. So in the next turn here, I believe I pull another switch, not wanting to take any kind of coverage attack. Yep, I go into my Starmie here, and again, I figure probably just throw off a Flip Turn is fine, and this is great for me because they go out into Rotom, and we've already seen leftovers in this thing, so we know it's not Choice Scarf, meaning that my Urshifu 100% outspeeds it, and I basically get a free KO here. So I'm just going to go right for the Surging Strikes, knock the thing out in 3 hits, and we're looking to be in a very commanding position. Their answer has to be the Rillaboom, of course, which makes sense. And again, I'm going to do what I did earlier. I don't want my Moltres getting knocked off, so I instead decide to throw out my Tangrowth. And this is a fine play, in my opinion, because the Assault Vest doesn't really do anything for us. It might help us take the Mew's special attacks a little bit better, but I don't think that's too valuable at this point in the game. I think it was more valuable for a potential Keldeo or the Rotom that we saw earlier. So they end up pulling a double switch here into their Aerodactyl, which is a great play, but I see that it doesn't have boots. So that to me immediately says that this might be a more offensive-oriented Aerodactyl, especially because, you could run offensive with boots, but I figure if you don't have boots, you gotta be packing something like a Life Orb or, some kind of boosting item. So here I was running some calcs, and just to give you guys some perspective, this match took place before the DLC where Dual Wing Beat was introduced. So the best attack that Aerodactyl could have in this position would be the Wing Attack, so I did run a calc, saw that I'd be able to live that, so I decided my best play is actually just to go for a Grass Knot, because I don't want this thing setting up on me for free, as I end up getting off a lot of damage on it, and I was pretty sure here that they were either going to go for a Roost or they were going to just throw off another attack, and I don't want my Tangrowth getting killed just yet. I do want to save that thing for the Rillaboom as well as the Zygarde. So I figure at this point in the game, Starmie doesn't really have a whole lot of use. We've already gotten a Toxic off on the Mew, and Aerodactyl, obviously, at this point in time, is very low. If they went for a Roost, I could just Flip Turn in the next turn, so either way, this kept momentum in my favor. So they just go for a Stone Edge here, and it is enough to pick up the KO, so Starmie's going to go down here. But honestly, I think that's a fine trade. And I'm going to decide to go out here into my Urshifu, knowing that if they don't go Rillaboom, I'm getting a KO. So that's exactly what ends up happening. They're going to throw out their Fortress here. Makes a lot of sense. And they're basically going to be forced to go out into the Rillaboom once again. Another one. Which I can take advantage of now, because at this point, there's no Stealth Rocker in their team, and I feel very comfortable sending out my Moltres into the Grassy Glide. Does very pitiful damage. And something important to note here is that we've seen a lot of exchanges where there's been some double switches that have been happening. At this point in the game, I'm so far ahead, it doesn't make sense for me to predict anything. Yeah, they could very easily go out into that Zygarde and start setting up, but I've got a full health Tangrowth with no status. I've got my Hippowdon, which can come in and just whirlwind that thing out. So I decide, no reason to predict. Let's just go for a Flamethrower. We do have the speed to outspeed this thing, and we're actually able to pick up the KO. So their response, of course, is going to have to be that Zygarde. And my best play in this situation is always to go right out into my Urshifu. HP on this thing is not very important anymore, and the big idea here is that we don't want them setting up for free. So this basically punishes them if they go for a Dragon Dance or a Coil. If they go for Dragon Dance, I just have to go for an Ice Punch. I can live any +1 attack. If they go for a Coil, my play is then to go for Surging Strikes because their critical hits are going to ignore that defense boost, and that's actually going to net me a 2-hit KO on this. Rather, I guess you would say a 6-hit KO. But as you can see here, they don't have any attack investment, so that 1,000 arrows is basically nothing. Urshifu is able to come in here and pick up the KO with the next Surging Strikes. And at this point, they have no way to win. Even if they have Recovery on the Mew, it's not really going to do them any favors because they are on a timer with Toxic. So I decided to try to preserve my differential here, go out into my Tangrowth, and then we can take any one hit. And then I'm going to scout for a potential Ice or Fire coverage move, which is what they end up going for. And Moltres is able to take that, and we're able to get a rather convincing 5-0. And again, it was kind of crazy. I was really feeling myself at this point in the season because this was the second 5-0 we had gotten consecutively. And I did feel very, very confident about this matchup. I didn't think that there was going to be any issues with it. Sure, Rotom could be annoying, but I thought that Urshifu was just such a huge offensive threat that they didn't have a way to respond to it. And that's why I think that, you know, it really goes to show that you don't always have to predict everything. Like, as you can see here on turn 4, when I went for that knockoff, that basically won me the game because now there is no drawback to clicking Surging Strikes. All I need to do is make sure I get Urshifu in safely, and I'm going to get a KO pretty much every time. So that's going to be it for this week, guys. As I mentioned at the start of the video, if you're interested in joining the DGBA or applying to it, again, both of those links are down in the description, and I will see you next time. Peace.